I never thought betrayal would come wearing the face of my own son. At 68, I believed I had seen life in all its shades: love, sacrifice, and hardship. But nothing prepared me for the morning when I tapped open my newly repaired security app and saw Marcus, my Marcus, rifling through my private papers like a thief. His wife Angelica stood beside him, whispering about forged deeds and quick money, as if my life's work were nothing but scraps on a table. They didn't know I was watching. They didn't know every word was being burned into my memory. My hands trembled, but not from age. It was rage, disbelief, and a fear I had never known, not of strangers, but of my own blood. The house I built brick by brick, the sanctuary of 30 years, had become their prize. And me? In their plan, I was already dead. They called my love crumbs. They called my caution paranoia. They thought I was too old, too confused, too weak to fight back. But they forgot one thing: age doesn't dull instincts. Age sharpens them. And on that day I swore a war had begun. A war they didn't even know they'd already lost. I turned 68 in early spring, when the jacaranda at the corner of my street shook out its purple flowers and laid a soft carpet across the sidewalk. It was the kind of beauty that arrives without asking permission, the kind that makes you believe life still keeps small surprises for those who wait. I like to think I'd earned that softness. I had worked 30 years as a nurse, night shifts that stretched until dawn, double shifts that swallowed holidays, the kind of hours that teach you how to be gentle with other people's pain and stern with your own. When my husband left, Marcus was 5, all elbows and questions, a small heat pressed to my side in the cold apartment. I learned then that love isn't a feeling. It's a schedule. Wake him, feed him, ferry him, cheer him, scold him, forgive him, repeat. This house came later, brick by brick, check by check. I signed the deed with hands still smelling faintly of antiseptic and cafeteria coffee. Marcus learned to ride a bike on the path that loops around the lemon tree. We painted the living room together, badly at first, better by the second coat, laughing when the roller slipped and left a lavender streak across his forehead. For years, when work felt like wading through other people's sorrow, I would come home, count the steady breaths of my sleeping boy, and tell myself we are safe, we are building. Safety has a way of becoming habit. Habits have a way of becoming blindness. When Marcus married Angelica, I made space as a mother does, at the table, in my routines, in the shape of my expectations. She was pretty in the sharp way that makes you sit up straighter. Efficient, too. She reorganized my pantry in an afternoon, relabeled my spice jars, suggested a different arrangement for the living room that maximized light. I told myself the tension I felt was just the friction of new patterns forming. When Marcus suggested they move in for a while to save money and keep an eye on me after I slipped on the back steps, I agreed. The fall was small, a bruise blooming on my hip, but the fear it woke was large. I heard my own voice, the nurse's voice, reminding me that aging isn't a single cliff, but a gradual slope dotted with pebbles you can trip over. I said yes because mothers say yes. We make space. At first, the house hummed with a different energy. More footsteps. More dishes in the sink that I washed without thinking. Angelica liked to open windows early and sage the kitchen, calling it a reset for the day. She asked about my medications, then offered to consolidate them into a weekly pill box, so nothing gets missed. I thanked her. It felt like care, and perhaps some of it was. The rest was something else, a slow tightening I didn't yet have words for. The security camera above the front hall had been broken for weeks. It watched nothing, a little blind eye in the ceiling. When the repairman didn't call back the first time, I let it slide. Vulnerability, like clutter, accumulates in corners until one day you can't ignore it. I finally scheduled a technician. He was young, polite, with patient hands. The app will let you see each room from your phone, he explained, tapping icons that bloomed into crisp squares of my living room, hallway, kitchen. If anything looks odd, you'll have recordings. I nodded, embarrassed by my relief. I don't expect trouble, I said. It's just peace of mind. Of course, he said, as if peace of mind were an appliance like any other, something you could order install, and forget. I paid him and didn't mention it to Marcus or Angelica. Not to keep a secret. Not then. Only because it felt like one small corner I could still arrange the way I wanted. Money had become a topic that hovered like steam in the bathroom. Present. Slightly suffocating, unavoidable. Prices climbed. My pension was steady but modest. I'd always prided myself on managing, on making the numbers behave. Marcus said his field was in flux. Angelica talked about opportunities just out of reach if only the ground would stop shifting beneath them. I helped where I could. A few extra bills pressed into Marcus's hand. Groceries quietly paid for. The small subsidies mothers provide because it's easier than watching your child flounder. "Mom, you don't have to," he would say, pocketing the money with a practiced reluctance. "I know," I said, and meant both. I don't have to. And I will. The house itself carries a memory palace of noises, pipes clicking awake, the hallway clock's stubborn tick, crows arguing on the fence at dusk. That week, a new silence joined the collection. The pause that follows when a room is left in a shape that isn't yours. Papers slightly askew on the coffee table. A drawer closed not quite flush. My folder of documents, a navy binder labeled neatly with tabs for deed, will, bank information, felt heavier when I moved it from shelf to desk. I told myself I was being fussy. Nurses know better than to ignore small symptoms, but mothers are experts at minimizing them. "Let us handle the paperwork," Angelica suggested one evening, her tone smooth as a brochure. "We can streamline things, make sure you're protected." "Protected from what?" I asked lightly. "From the headaches," she said, smiling. "From anything falling through the cracks," I laughed, but something in her gaze didn't. Marcus squeezed my shoulder. "Angelica's great with details," he said. "She kept my taxes from being a disaster last year." I remembered Marcus at 8 years old, cheeks sticky with lemonade, insisting he could fix the wobbly table by himself. He had tightened the wrong screws, and the table wobbled worse. I wanted to say, details matter most when you don't understand the whole. Instead, I said, "That's kind of you," and placed the navy binder in my desk drawer, the one that locks with a small brass key I keep on my chain. On the morning the technician came, rain patterned the windows, soft and steady. Angelica lit a candle for freshness. Marcus mentioned a job interview, his voice casual, a little too practiced. I wished him luck and told him the chicken would be defrosted by noon. Routine is the mother of calm. He kissed my forehead and left. Angelica said she'd pick up groceries. The door closed. The house exhaled. I stood in the kitchen, hands curled around a mug I didn't drink from, listening to the house's old heart beating in pipes and vents. The repaired cameras blinked their small, silent readiness. I didn't know then that readiness is not peace. It's a bridge between denial and truth. I only knew that I was tired of living in the gray, half worry, half love. Tired of telling myself that suspicion was ingratitude. I rinsed the mug, dried it, and set it on the rack lined up with its twins, each one facing the same direction like a tiny parade. The phone buzzed. A new app icon waited, bright and practical. I told myself I'd test it later. Then I remembered the nurse's rule I had taught 100 new aides on 100 frantic nights. When something might save a life, test it now. I tapped the screen. The house looked back at me. The screen lit up with a clear view of my living room. For a breathless second, I admired the sharpness of the picture, the way sunlight spilled across the coffee table like liquid gold. Then the admiration curdled, because the coffee table wasn't empty. My documents, my navy binder, my neatly tabbed folders, were scattered in a messy fan across the surface. And standing over them was my son, Marcus. His head was bent, his hands riffling through papers as if they belonged to him. He wasn't careful. He wasn't respectful. He pawed through my life's records the way a thief paws through a cash drawer. Beside him stood Angelica, elegant even in crime, holding a sheet up to the window light. The casual way she tilted it, as if hunting for treasure, chilled me more than Marcus's frantic searching. The sound clicked on, crisp, merciless. Where's the original deed? Angelica's voice cut the air, cool and businesslike. Albert said without it, the forgery won't hold. Albert. The name dropped into my stomach like a stone. I remembered the man vaguely. A sharp-suited lawyer Marcus had once brought up over dinner, someone he'd met at a bar. My instinct then had been unease. Now I understood why. It has to be here, Marcus muttered, his frustration twisting his voice. Mom keeps everything organized, obsessively. He spat the word like it was an insult. The very order that had kept our lives afloat for decades turned suddenly into a curse. Angelica smirked. Look at this. Last appraisal says the house is worth over $500,000. Albert was right, it's worth all the trouble. $500,000. My heart thudded painfully. 30 years of double shifts, skipped vacations, worn shoes, all crystallized into the bricks and beams of this house. The home where I had raised Marcus, where I had tucked him into bed after nightmares, where every corner held a memory of sacrifice. And now it was a prize to be stolen. Angelica's voice sharpened. Once the deed is in our name, we'll sell. Move her into a one-bedroom. Enough for her last years. Her last years. They spoke as though I were already gone, as though I were a piece of furniture to be relocated. I pressed the phone closer to my chest. My body shook, not from age, not from weakness, but from the cold electricity of betrayal. Marcus straightened suddenly and walked toward the hallway. The second camera view popped up. My bedroom. I watched in frozen horror as he opened drawers, yanked files, searched with growing fury. She must have a safe deposit box, he muttered. She was always paranoid. Paranoid. The word stung. Once he had teased me gently for double-checking locks or keeping receipts. He used to call it Mom's safety net. Now it was a flaw, an obstacle to his theft. He returned to the living room empty-handed. Angelica's patience was gone. Her arms folded, her voice clipped. Albert gave us until Friday. Without that deed, there's no forgery. Without the forgery, we're stuck living on your mother's crumbs. Crumbs. The $700 I gave them monthly from my pension. Money I denied myself in small ways. The cable package I canceled. The new shoes I didn't buy. Reduced to crumbs. Marcus slumped into my favorite armchair, the same one where he had once curled up beside me with picture books. We'll pressure her. Say it's insurance paperwork. She won't read it. She's been confused lately. Confused. Another weaponized word. Yes, sometimes names slipped. Sometimes I lost track of where I'd left my glasses. That wasn't confusion. It was age. Normal. But they were building a story, chiseling away at my credibility. What if she gets suspicious? Angelica asked. Marcus shrugged, careless. What's she going to do? Call the police on her son? Once we sign with Albert, it's irreversible. Angelica smiled. It wasn't joy, it was hunger satisfied. Perfect. Tomorrow, we'll bring her documents. Say it's for updating her will. She'll sign. I should have screamed. I should have stormed into the living room. Instead, I sat frozen in the kitchen, phone clutched tight, watching the two people I lived with, the two people I trusted most, dissect my life like predators. Then Marcus stopped. He looked straight toward the camera. My heart stopped. Did he know? Could he see me watching? His eyes lingered on the lens. For a heartbeat, I was sure the secret was broken. Then he only sighed. I wish we didn't have to do this, he whispered. A flicker of humanity, maybe. A ghost of the boy I had raised. My heart sparked with desperate hope, but Angelica crushed it with a hand on his shoulder. Marcus, think of our future. The kids we want. Do you want to depend on an old woman who gets more senile every day? This house is our chance, and just like that, my son's face hardened. The hope died. You're right, he said. It's time to think about us. The words were a knife. I closed the app, my hands trembling. I wanted to vomit, to cry, to scream. But above all, I understood something sharp and unshakable. They didn't know I was watching. They didn't know I had proof, and for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel powerless. The war had begun, and they had already lost. The next morning, the house felt different, like a stage where I was the unsuspecting actress and they were the directors, adjusting lights and lines to fit their script. I moved through the kitchen, made tea, buttered toast. Ordinary motions, yet every word from Marcus and Angelica carried an edge, as if rehearsed. "Mom," Angelica said brightly, placing her coffee mug on the table. "I've been thinking. Maybe we should review some of your documents soon. You know, just to make sure everything is in order." Her voice was sugar, her smile porcelain. But I heard the echo of last night. "She'll sign without asking questions." I forced a smile. "That's thoughtful, dear. Maybe later." Marcus slid into the chair across from me, his eyes darting toward Angelica before settling on me. "We just want to protect you, Mom. You've been, well, a little forgetful lately," the word stung. Forgetful. Yesterday it was confused. Today it was forgetful. Tomorrow it would be incapable. They were stacking words like bricks, building a cage around me. I buttered another slice of toast with steady hands. "Everyone forgets things. Even you, Marcus. Remember when you lost your car keys for 2 days?" Angelica laughed lightly, too quickly. "Of course. But you know what we mean. At your age, it's better to let us handle the stressful details. Less for you to worry about, at my age." As though years were proof of incompetence, not wisdom. I nodded slowly, storing every phrase in the filing cabinet of my memory. They thought they were planting doubts, but I was cataloging evidence. The campaign continued quietly, insidiously. On Tuesday, Marcus suggested I stop handling grocery lists. "We'll take care of that, Mom. You always forget something." On Wednesday, Angelica insisted on organizing my medications into a weekly pill box, just to prevent mistakes. "Don't you remember almost taking the wrong pill last month?" I remembered perfectly. I had paused before swallowing, double-checked the label, and avoided the mistake. But in her version, my caution became confusion. On Thursday, I overheard them whispering in the hallway. "She's too sharp," Marcus muttered. "She notices everything. Then we create circumstances," Angelica replied coolly. "Take away her supports. Without us, she'll look unstable." It's classic. Her tone was clinical, detached, as though I were a case study, not a mother. I retreated to my bedroom, sat on the edge of the bed, and stared at the framed photograph of Marcus at 10 years old. Missing teeth, ice cream smeared on his chin. The boy in the photo had clung to me after nightmares. The man outside my door plotted my erasure. The financial pressure began subtly. "Mom," Marcus said one evening, dropping heavily into the armchair, "we've been struggling." Angelica's hours got cut. "I'm still between jobs." I offered what I always had, a few bills from my pension envelope. He sighed, almost theatrically. "It's not enough anymore." Angelica leaned forward. "Maybe if you signed some papers, we could manage things better." Consolidate finances. Streamline. Streamline. A polite word for control. I feigned tiredness. "Let's talk later." Their disappointment flickered across their faces, anger disguised as concern. I had given them money but not power. That was the real hunger. By the weekend, they escalated. I discovered my supplemental medical insurance had been canceled. When I called the company in confusion, they told me my son had authorized it. "He has no legal right," I protested. "Ma'am, he said he was handling your affairs," the clerk replied blandly. I hung up with shaking hands. My affairs. Already they were erasing me. That evening, I confronted Marcus. "You canceled my insurance." He didn't flinch. "It was too expensive, Mom. Unnecessary." Unnecessary? My voice trembled with fury. "That coverage was my safety net." Angelica's voice sliced in, soft but sharp. "See? This is exactly why we're worried. You overreact. It was a practical decision, nothing more. Maybe you don't realize how paranoid you sound." Paranoid. The word struck like a slap. I forced my face calm. "Perhaps you're right," I said evenly. "I get nervous sometimes." Her eyes lit up with quiet triumph. She thought she had won. She didn't know I was memorizing every line of her performance. In the privacy of my room, I opened the security app again. I replayed their conversations, their plotting. Each phrase was a puzzle piece slotting into place. She won't read what she's signing. She's confused, paranoid, forgetful. They weren't just planning to steal my house. They were constructing an alternate reality, one where I was senile, unfit, incapable. A world where no one would believe me if I cried theft. I pressed my palm flat against the desk, grounding myself. Nurses know, when a patient's vitals crash, you don't panic. You act. So I acted. I copied the recordings to a hidden USB drive. I emailed them to a secret account I created with shaking fingers. I hid the drive in the sewing kit Angelica had never touched. If they thought I was paranoid, I would use that paranoia as armor. At dinner, Angelica served stew with a too bright smile. "Mom, you've seemed off lately. More anxious. Maybe you should see a doctor, just to make sure everything's okay upstairs." The implication was deliberate. I spooned stew into my bowl, steady, deliberate. "Perhaps," I said. "Maybe next week." Marcus reached across the table, his hand heavy on mine. "We only want the best for you." I met his eyes, searching for the boy I raised. He was gone. What looked back at me was a man rehearsing a role, his lines fed to him by the woman at his side. I smiled faintly. "I know, son. That's why I trust you." The lie slid smoothly from my lips, sweeter than the stew. But inside, I swore. The game had changed. They were building a prison of doubt. I would build a case of truth, and when the walls closed in, I would be ready. It was a Wednesday morning, gray and heavy with rain. The house smelled of coffee and damp wood, and I felt a storm building inside me that had nothing to do with the weather. I had spent days watching them circle me like vultures, tightening the trap with whispers of paranoia and forgetfulness. Every lie was a thread, and they thought I was tangled. But I was weaving my own net, silent, invisible. Marcus entered the kitchen with a folder in his hands. Angelica followed, her heels clicking softly against the tiles, her expression bright with false warmth. "Mom," Marcus began, setting the folder on the dining table. "We need to talk to you about something important." I placed my teacup down carefully. "Of course, my love." "What is it?" Angelica slid the folder toward me. "We've been thinking about your future, your financial security. A friend of Marcus's, a very respected lawyer, helped us prepare these documents. Just standard forms. Nothing complicated." I opened the folder. Pages of dense legal text swam before my eyes, paragraphs in small print, words that leapt out like daggers. Transfer. Irrevocable. Power of attorney. Marcus leaned forward, his tone tender but rehearsed. "It's just to make sure everything is in order in case something ever happens to you. We don't want to be caught unprepared." Angelica pointed to the signature lines. "All you have to do is sign here, here, and here." I looked up slowly, forcing my face blank. "What exactly am I signing?" "Technical things," Marcus said quickly. "Boring legal jargon. The important thing is that it protects you." "Protects me," I echoed. "From what?" "From confusion later," Angelica said smoothly. "From mistakes. You've been, well, sometimes a little unsure about details. This way Marcus can help you manage everything." There it was again, the knife of doubt, twisted with a smile. I set the pen down. "I'd like to read everything first." Angelica's mask cracked for a moment. Her lips tightened. "Marisol, it's 20 pages of legal language. It would take you days to understand." "Then I'll take days," I replied calmly. Marcus's patience frayed. "Mom, please. The lawyer gave us an appointment for tomorrow. If we don't bring the signed documents, we'll lose the opportunity." My voice sharpened. "What opportunity? To steal my house while I'm still breathing?" The words hung in the air like lightning. For a moment, the kitchen froze. Marcus's face went pale, his mouth opening and closing without sound. Angelica recovered first, her smile icy. "You're confused," she said softly. "Nobody wants to steal anything." "You're misinterpreting?" "Am I?" I asked. "Then explain why these papers give you the power to sell my property without my consent." I jabbed a finger at the clause I had already underlined in my mind. Angelica's voice rose, brittle. "That's for emergencies. If you needed expensive care in a retirement home you've already discussed selling this house to fund," I cut in. Silence. Pure, thick silence. Marcus slammed his fist on the table. Enough! You're twisting everything. We're trying to help you. My voice trembled, but not with fear. With fury. Help? By calling me paranoid? By canceling my insurance behind my back? By plotting with Albert to forge documents? His eyes widened. How do you— I leaned closer, my voice a whisper sharpened to a blade. I heard you. Every word. Every filthy plan. Angelica's chair screeched as she stood. You've been spying on us? I've been protecting myself, I said. From the 2 people I let into my home, the 2 people I fed, supported, and loved. My son, my daughter-in-law. My betrayers! Marcus's face twisted, half guilt, half rage. You're making a mistake, Mom. You don't understand how hard things have been for us. I understand perfectly, I snapped. I understand that the boy I raised, the man I sacrificed my life for, has chosen greed over blood. And I understand that the woman he married has sharpened that greed into a weapon against me. For the first time, Marcus faltered. His eyes shone with something raw, shame maybe. But Angelica crushed it with a hand on his arm. Don't listen to her, she hissed. She's trying to turn you against yourself. She's not well, I laughed bitterly. Not well? Because I refused to sign my own death sentence? The storm broke then. Marcus's voice rose to a shout, the kind of voice I hadn't heard since his teenage tantrums. Just sign the damn papers. The shout echoed through the kitchen like a gunshot. My teacup rattled against the saucer. For a moment, none of us moved. I stared at him, really stared. The mask of dutiful son was gone. The boy I had raised, the man I thought I knew, had vanished. In his place stood a stranger, desperate and dangerous. My voice came out low, steady. No, Marcus. I will not sign. Not today. Not ever. The silence that followed was heavier than the rain pounding the windows. Angelica's smile returned, thin and poisonous. Then you leave us no choice. The words slithered between us, a promise, a threat. And in that instant I understood. The war was no longer hidden. It was open, declared, and there would be no truce. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in my bed with the sound of Marcus's shout still ringing in my ears. Just sign the damn papers. My hands trembled, but not from weakness. From resolve. They thought they had cornered me, turned me into a frail, confused old woman who would crumble under pressure. But I hadn't survived 3 decades of double shifts, heartbreak, and loneliness just to surrender my dignity now. I needed allies. Real ones. The next morning, while Marcus and Angelica pretended to run errands, I reached for my phone. My fingers shook as I dialed a number I had known for 15 years. Dr. Rodriguez, my family physician. She had treated me through flu seasons and routine checkups, through Marcus's childhood scrapes and my exhaustion. If anyone could see through the lies, it was her. Doctor? I said when she picked up, my voice low, urgent. I need to see you privately. Not the appointment Marcus scheduled. Alone. Her silence was brief but heavy. Marisol, are you safe? Safe. The word almost undid me. Not entirely, I admitted. My son and his wife are trying to take my house. They're making me look incompetent so no one will believe me. Do you have proof? She asked gently. Yes, I whispered. Recordings, conversations. Enough to show their plan. Her tone hardened. Come to my office today. I'll clear the schedule. At her clinic, I poured out everything. The cameras, the documents, the lies. Dr. Rodriguez listened without interruption, her pen scratching notes across the page. Then she looked up, her eyes steady. Marisol, I've seen you for years. You are not confused, and you are certainly not paranoid. But we'll make it official. A full cognitive exam. For the next hour, she tested me. Memory, reasoning, orientation, problem-solving. I answered every question with clarity sharpened by fury. At the end, she set her pen down. You're sharper than most people 20 years younger. I'll document this officially. You are fully competent, capable of making all your own legal and financial decisions. Relief flooded me so sharply I almost cried. Proof. Solid, undeniable proof. But she wasn't done. You need more than a medical report. You need legal protection. I'll connect you with a lawyer who specializes in elder rights, and a private investigator, someone who can help you gather evidence safely. By evening, my kitchen had become a war room. The lawyer, Mr. Patel, spoke with crisp authority over the phone. Mrs. Jones, if your son and his wife are attempting fraud, we must document everything. Do not sign a single paper. Do not confront them directly yet. Let us gather airtight evidence. Once we have it, we'll press charges or negotiate from a position of strength. The private investigator, a calm man named Johnson, explained the plan. We'll install hidden microphones and cameras, perfectly legal in your own home, especially under suspicion of criminal activity. All we need is for them to confess directly. Once they do, we'll have them confess. The word felt both impossible and inevitable. Marcus had already shouted his rage at me. Angelica's arrogance was boundless. They would slip. They always did. That night, I played my part. I cooked their favorite stew, served it with warm bread, smiled when Angelica complimented the seasoning. I asked Marcus about his job search, feigned sympathy when he sighed about endless rejections. I forced myself to look small, fragile, trusting. Inside, I was steel. While they ate, I remembered every sacrifice I had made. The nights I stayed awake by Marcus's bedside when he was sick. The years I stitched uniforms at midnight to pay for his school trips. The meals I skipped so he wouldn't feel hunger. I thought of all the love I had given, unconditionally, blindly. And I realized, love without boundaries becomes a weapon in the wrong hands. They believed they were tightening the noose. In truth, I was handing them the rope. The next morning, Johnson arrived discreetly. Within an hour, tiny microphones were sewn into my blouse. Invisible cameras nested in corners of the dining room and living room. Your role is simple, he said. Let them talk. Don't argue. Don't accuse. Just guide the conversation. Get them to admit the forgery plan. We'll handle the rest. I nodded, my heart pounding. When Marcus and Angelica returned, I acted as though nothing had changed. I folded laundry, hummed softly, played the role of the oblivious mother, but in the mirror, I barely recognized myself. This wasn't weakness anymore. This was strategy. That evening, as rain tapped against the windows, Marcus approached me with the same folder of documents. Angelica hovered behind him like a shadow. Mom, he said gently. Too gently. We really need you to sign. It's important. I looked down at the papers, then up at him. My voice was calm. I understand. But before I sign, I want to make sure everything is explained clearly. I don't want to be confused. Angelica smiled, her eyes glinting. Of course. We'll go through each page tomorrow. Line by line. Perfect. Exactly what I needed. Thank you, I murmured, my hands steady as I closed the folder. I just want to be sure. They exchanged a look of triumph, certain they had won. But upstairs, in my locked drawer, a USB drive waited. In my email, recordings sat like loaded weapons. And tomorrow, microphones would capture every word of their conspiracy. They thought I was broken. They thought I was blind. But the truth was simple. I wasn't the prey anymore. I was the trap. The next day arrived with a sky so bright it almost mocked me. Sunlight spilled across the table where Marcus had already laid out the papers. Every sheet was carefully arranged, signature lines marked with neat little X's. Angelica stood nearby, arms crossed, her smile sharp enough to cut glass. All right, Mom, Marcus said with studied patience, the kind a teacher uses on a child who's too slow. We're going to go through these one by one, so you feel comfortable. I adjusted my blouse, making sure the tiny microphone Johnson had hidden was secure. My heart thumped, not from fear but from anticipation. This was it, the moment we had been preparing for. Angelica slid the first document toward me. This one simply allows Marcus to manage your affairs if you're ever unable to. I traced a finger along the clause I had memorized. What exactly does unable to mean? Marcus shifted. Well, if you got sick, or your memory declined, or you just decided it was too much work. Or, I said softly, if you two decided my memory had declined. Silence. A glance passed between them. sharp and warning. "That's not what we mean," Angelica said quickly. I smiled faintly. "It sounds very convenient, almost as if you were preparing for it." Marcus's patience cracked. "Mom, don't make this difficult. We're trying to help you." "Help me?" My voice rose just slightly. "By selling my house behind my back? By calling me paranoid?" Marcus froze. Angelica's eyes narrowed. "Where did you get that idea?" she asked coolly. "From your own mouths," I replied, steady. "From the recordings." The blood drained from Marcus's face. "Recordings?" I leaned back in my chair, calm as the storm outside gathered. "Yes, every conversation. Every whisper about Albert, every plan to forge my signature, every insult you threw about my so-called paranoia." Angelica recovered first, her laugh brittle. "That's ridiculous. Even if you did record us, it's illegal. No one would take it seriously." "Actually," a new voice cut in, firm and professional. The front door opened. Detective Johnson stepped inside, followed by 2 uniformed officers and Mr. Patel, my lawyer. The room shattered. Marcus lurched to his feet, his face a mask of disbelief. Angelica stumbled backward, knocking over a chair. "What is this?" Marcus demanded. "This," Johnson said calmly, "is the end of your scheme. Marcus Jones and Angelica Williams, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, attempted forgery, and elder financial abuse." The officers moved forward, cuffs glinting in the light. "No," Marcus shouted, backing away. "She's lying." "She's sick, paranoid." I reached into my blouse and pulled out the microphone, setting it on the table beside the documents. "Actually," I said softly, "I'm perfectly sane." "And you just confessed on tape." Angelica's face twisted, half fury, half disbelief. "This is a trap," she spat. "You can't do this." Mr. Patel gathered the papers calmly. "On the contrary, Mrs. Jones has every legal right to record conversations in her own home, and with Dr. Rodriguez's report confirming her mental clarity, the evidence is overwhelming." The officers seized Marcus first. His hands shook as they pulled them behind his back, the metallic click of the cuffs echoing in the room. "Mom!" he cried, his voice breaking. "You can't let them do this." "I'm your son." I met his gaze, my heart heavy but resolute. "You stopped being my son the moment you chose greed over love." Angelica fought harder, thrashing as the second officer restrained her. "We took care of you. We gave you everything. You fed on me like vultures," I replied coldly. "But you didn't wait for me to die. You tried to kill me with lies." Her words dissolved into a stream of curses as the officer forced her wrists into the cuffs. Marcus sagged against the officer holding him. His face was pale, his eyes red. "Mom, please, don't let them take me." I was desperate. "I made mistakes, but I'm still your son." Tears burned behind my eyes, but I didn't let them fall. "I gave you 35 years of my life, Marcus. You gave me betrayal. This is the result." Detective Johnson nodded to me respectfully. "Mrs. Jones, with your permission, we'll take them in. The prosecutor is ready to file charges." I exhaled, a long, trembling breath. "Do what you must." The officers led them toward the door. Angelica spat over her shoulder, her voice venomous. "You'll regret this, old woman. Without us, you'll rot alone." I stood taller than I had in years. Better alone than betrayed. The door slammed shut behind them. Silence filled the house. Not the silence of fear, but of freedom. I walked slowly to my armchair, the one Marcus had claimed the day before, and sat down. My hands were steady now. My heart still ached, but beneath the ache was something fierce. Victory. For the first time in weeks, I felt the house breathe with me again. My home, my life, mine. The storm outside broke then, rain thrashing against the windows. But inside, the war was over, and I had won. The house was silent after they left, but it was a new kind of silence, one that no longer pressed against my chest like a weight. It was the silence of safety, of walls that once again belonged to me alone. For weeks I had lived like a stranger in my own home, tiptoeing around traps set by the people I trusted most. Now, with the echo of handcuffs still fresh in my ears, I felt the air clear. Detective Johnson promised regular updates. Mr. Patel stayed behind long enough to assure me the law was firmly on my side. "They'll be facing multiple charges," he said, tapping the fraudulent documents into a neat stack. "Even if they plead, they won't escape accountability." I nodded, though my heart was heavy. Justice, I realized, is not the same as peace. Justice demands sacrifice, and in this case, the sacrifice was my S. That night, I sat in my armchair, the same one Marcus had called his spot. I remembered him as a child curled in my lap, small arms around my neck, whispering fears of monsters. I used to promise him that as long as I lived, no monster could touch him. How could I have known that someday the monster would wear his own face? For days afterward, I moved through the house like someone relearning the shape of her life. I opened drawers without fear, arranged my documents in perfect order, cooked meals for one. At first, the emptiness felt unbearable, like walking through a graveyard of memories. But slowly, a new rhythm emerged, one that was mine alone. Neighbors stopped by more often. Mrs. Lee from across the street brought me soup. The young couple next door fixed the hinge on my back gate. In their small acts, I found the beginnings of something unexpected, a chosen family, one built not from blood but from respect and kindness. 3 months later, the lawyer called. Marcus and Angelica had accepted a deal, 18 months in prison instead of the decade they might have faced. In return, they signed away any future claim to my property and agreed to a permanent restraining order. They would never set foot in my life again. Some people asked if I regretted it. "He's your only son," they said. "Blood is blood, but blood alone does not make family. Family is love, honesty, respect. And when those are gone, blood becomes nothing but a red stain that refuses to wash out. Do I regret raising him? No. A mother does what she must for her child. I regret only that I did not see sooner how my sacrifices had fed his entitlement. Love without boundaries had turned into permission for betrayal. Now, I wake each morning in a house that is truly mine. I drink coffee on the porch and listen to the birds quarrel in the lemon tree. Sometimes, when the wind moves just right, I hear echoes of the past, Marcus's laughter, the patter of his small feet. I allow myself those memories, but I no longer let them chain me. I have learned a final truth. Sometimes, to save yourself, you must be willing to lose those you thought you loved the most. Strength is not the absence of pain. It is the decision to live despite it. As I lock the front door each night, the brass key cool in my palm, I whisper to myself, "This is my house. My life, my peace, and no one, not even my own son, will take that from me again."